Hey, it's Ephruz here to talk about things that I find interesting at CES, and for day 2 I'm going to talk about cases. I'm mostly going to be talking about empty cases, but I do have a few pre-built systems in here that aren't necessarily just cases, because I find them interesting in terms of where the market can be going in the context of how our hardware is developing. So I'll get to that once we get to those pieces of hardware. So first we're going to start with the Phanteks Enthoo Elite. And for those of you who don't know, my case is a Fantex Enthoo Pro M. So I have some experience in terms with how Fantex works with their build quality. I was personally really impressed with the Enthoo Pro M, with the exception of side panel windows. I feel like any side panel window, or any side panel that, even if whether it has a window or not, any side panel I will always have a problem with if I have to screw in the side panel as opposed to it just having a hitch or magnets or something along those lines. But beyond that, I was really impressed with the build quality and how easy it was to build in. It was the first PC that I ever completely built a computer in. Even though I had the parts in a pre-assembled PC, I moved them into this case, and that required disassembling and reassembling all the parts, and that was really easy. And I have taken the CPU out and put in new thermal paste two separate times, and both of those instances were really easy. Made me feel like I was getting nervous for no reason. So basically, the Enthoo Elite is a manifestation of everything that Fantex has put in a case in terms of the features and combine them. If you can tell, this has like this raised bottom from the Enthoo Primo, which means that you'll have no problem putting this on carpets, because this metal will make sure that the carpet is not in the way in terms of air coming into the power supply and stuff like that. And you'll get a little bit more airflow from the bottom as well. But beyond that, it's fairly negligible, relatively speaking. It has one side panel window, and I really do find this strip with the Fantex logo on it very nice. I think it gives it a very unique character, and I think that's definitely something worth doing on a case when you're talking about beautiful industrial design that costs a lot of money. And then it's supposed to support massive amounts of water cooling. I remember looking it up. I believe it's 420 millimeter rads on the front and top and bottom, and I think one side on the bottom as well. I think this thing supports 420 mil rads, though I can't really see it here. And then on this side panel over here, it supports a 240 millimeter rad, and then on the back here, it supports a 120 millimeter rad. So you can definitely run a fully decked out water cooling loop in this case. And it would be fairly easy to assemble given its size. I believe it is a full E-ATX case, very tall. I think it's the biggest case they've ever made. And then in terms of the materials, it's made out of 4 millimeter aluminum, and the tempered glass is also 4 millimeters. So this is probably going to be fine, given that Fantex will probably likely ship this case, given the fact that it costs $900 US. It's probably going to ship in the safest foam you could ever imagine, like stuff that we've demanded all cases be shipped in, but way thicker. So really looking forward to this case. Oh, also, this lighting is RGB, and apparently it's compatible with Asus Aura, so I have a feeling that there's pretty much anyone who buys this case is going to be using Asus hardware, because it's like, if you're spending $900 on a case, you're going to spend a few extra bucks to get those kinds of features out of your case and in your hardware. So the next case I want to talk about is the Noctis 450 ROG from NZXT, partnered with Asus. Now, the thing that makes this interesting is that it shows, I feel like Asus is, so the next thing I want to talk about is the NZXT Noctis 450 ROG partnered up with Asus. This is really interesting because despite the LEDs that they show in the previews, apparently every LED in the case is an RGB LED in the sense that like all the LED strips, the NZXT logo, all this is capable of being RGB. I don't know if the power button is, but I don't think that's too important. I don't necessarily like this red accent over here, but ROG has always been red, so I guess it's not that big of a deal. The thing that's important about this is that it shows a partnership in the sense that you will not have to worry about making sure that all of your hardware is in sync in terms of its colors. It's basically, if you get a Noctis 450 ROG and an Asus Aura compatible motherboard, you won't need an NZXT hue because you will be able to sync all of the LEDs that are in your case. So the case LEDs, the NZXT liquid cooler LEDs, the NZXT Air RGB fan LEDs, and any Asus Aura hardware will all be able to sync their lighting together, which means that your entire system can work off of Asus Aura. And I feel like this is a in terms of hardware compatibility and what you would want out of a case, understand the fact that you are paying for the hardware that you get. So even if you don't use RGB LEDs, you are paying for the RGB LEDs, and it just makes the most sense when companies do partnerships like this to get stuff like a case that is compatible if it has LEDs with hardware that already exists. Now, I would like to see more companies work together to try and make sure that RGB is not something that is an issue in regards to being synchronous with other LEDs either inside the computer or outside of the computer, because this will also sync with Asus Aura on the keyboard, mouse, and I don't think they have a headset, but if they do have a headset, it'll probably have RGB LEDs on it. So, and this is just the refined variant of RGB LEDs popularizing. I feel like it's not going to get much beyond this point, though I feel like they'll probably just add more or make them more power efficient or something like that. But I feel like this is it. This is the time to, if you've been waiting on RGB stuff, this is the time to get RGB stuff if you really want it. Outside of that, it's basically just a Noctis 450. This texture is very reminiscent of Asus's ROG Claymore keyboard, which is something that I really like. It really shows a unification of all of their hardware. I feel like there are some companies that between generation and generation do logo changes and stuff like that where it's harder to get the perfect match of hardware that you want. And I feel like this is releasing everything at the same time. It's very smart and cohesive work with NZXT and Asus. Moving on, I wanted to talk about how Thermaltake has released two new cases. One less important to me, one more important to me. The View 31 and View 31 TG RGB. This case, I feel like, is just standard Thermaltake case with tempered glass. I'm not really a fan of a lot of the tempered glass cases that are coming out right now, not necessarily because they're bad, but because one thing that it doesn't make sense to me at all is that they put tempered glass panels on the cable management side, which is like, I want to hide that always. Even if my cable management is good, I want to hide it, because unless it's perfect, I'm not going to want it to be visible, and I'm typically too lazy or too anxious to get my computer up and running to want that kind of display going on one side. And also that just adds more points of very aesthetically displeasing damage. Like, it's just a mess, in my opinion. I like tempered glass on the front, and I like tempered glass on the side, and I like tempered glass on the top if you are able to bridge a gap so that air can be pushed out in a efficient manner. But I do not like tempered glass on the rear. One thing that's interesting about this case is that it has this GPU mount that allows you to display a GPU like this, and I believe you can still see like the top of the first GPU if your motherboard's PCI Express slot is that high, but based on this picture, I'm not entirely positive. Now, outside of that, I feel like they're advertising their own RGB stuff. I really am not interested in it personally because I feel like Thermaltake has way too much competition with Asus and with NZXT, and even with companies like Corsair, who have enough pieces of hardware inside a PC that you don't really need to worry about getting compatibility issues. You can have an RGB CPU cooler, RGB fans, and just a plain old motherboard without any of those features in terms of RGB LEDs and whatnot. Like that's still enough RGB LEDs for the most part. So what's more important to me between these two cases is this case, the P1TG. You can tell just from the samples that this thing is sagging a little bit, but it is a very heavy build for what kind of case it is. But basically, I wanted to talk about how this case is mini ITX, has 5 expansion slots, which I find really strange for a mini ITX build, but I assume that's so you can do stuff like install more PCI Express based stuff through adapters. Maybe like, I don't know if they have a PCI Express to M.2 adapter for PCI Express based storage, but I feel like that would be very useful to have 5 expansion slots if you have a M.2 slot in your MITX board, and this would actually increase compatibility theoretically, because there are some motherboards that have M.2 slots that are shorter, which means that you have a lot less compatibility, and this would erase that. Now, in terms of this PC's aesthetics, I feel like it's not really meant to be on a stand. It seems like it's meant to either hang on a wall or be mounted where this whole thing is facing upward, so the glass is facing up, because you don't see it in this picture, but if you look up some videos regarding it, it does have feet on the back of this, so it's perfectly capable of standing on that side. And I feel like that really puts your hardware on display. It's really nice looking. Has like a in-between of a test bench and a wall-mounted PC. I know they released an ATX version of this case. I don't remember what the specific model number was, but I've been a fan of it. I don't really see a huge issue in regards to the maintenance because, yes, dust will settle on it, but it's going to be protected for the most part, and it's really easy to blow any dust out of this. So the next thing I want to talk about is that Deepcool released a sequel to the Tristellar called the Quadstellar, and I assume that this case is about the same size as the Tristellar, because if you look at this, it has individual cabins for a graphics card, motherboard, power supply, and hard drive disk, and this has room for a full ATX motherboard. So this is probably going to be a very big case if one of these compartments fits an ATX motherboard. This is really nice because ATX motherboards have lots of SATA ports, usually relative to mini ITX boards, and because this case supports up to 9 3.5-inch HDDs or 12 2.5-inch HDDs or SSDs, you're probably not going to run into issues with running out of storage, but even if you do, you can daisy chain your hard drives and you can just Velcro SSDs all over the place inside this case, where you won't run into interference or heat issues. So one of these is for the motherboard, one of these is for the graphics card. I wouldn't be surprised if this can support an ATX motherboard, if another one of these can support 2 graphics cards in it with a riser, though that would probably lead to very high thermals. But if you have blower style coolers, it's not the end of the world. It says it can support a 360mm rad at the front and a 240mm rad at the bottom. Now this begs the question, what's the front? Where? Because I really don't think, if this is an ATX motherboard, that any of these compartments are going to have a 360mm rad in it. But this looks like where the 240mm rad is going to be. So you could put, in theory, say this 240mm rad supports 2 120mm rads. You could put a 360mm rad here for the CPU cooler, and then you could have 2 hybrid coolers, cable managed over here, so where they're intaking air over here. And I feel like this would be really convenient if this is the truth, because basically the GPUs are intaking its own air and exhaling or exhausting all that air out the back over here, and then the CPU cooler, wherever it's mounted, also gets its own air. So that would be really nice in terms of thermals. But beyond that, this case is basically mostly aesthetics. It'll probably be very difficult to build in, especially if you're somebody who hasn't built a lot of computers before. But this is definitely an improvement, in my opinion, over the TriStellar in terms of aesthetic. Also, this has RGB LEDs, so you can make this whatever you want. Now, I think the bigger deal from Thermaltake is this case, the Tower 900 E-ATX case. Now, this case is obviously designed to show off what's on your motherboard, and then it has mounts for 2 hard drives because they had room for it, I guess. But basically, this is for people who want their cases to be sexy. Like, this is designed for that. It has massive radiator support. 420, or that might be 480 actually. So 480. I wonder if that means it would support a 560 mil rad, which you could get in water cooling loops, custom built. But this shows a 480, and then they have a 240 mil rad over here, and that's pretty much enough for your average water cooling loop. But I believe it supports more. Where are the specs for this? Specifications. Says it supports, 4140. So this could support a 560 mil rad. And then on the right side, same thing. And then on the top, a 280. And then on the rear, a 280. So it has, in theory, 2 280s and up to 2 280s and up to 2 560 mil rads in there. So that would create a pretty epic water cooling loop that no one will see, but this is designed to show off your tubing and your motherboard, so that doesn't matter. Now, personally, I wonder if you can make this look good. Look at this. This is a ATX board, so this is a huge case. I wonder if you can make this look good with something like EVGA's recently announced modular water cooling loops that they are coming out with, where they're essentially releasing AIOs with quick, I forget what the term is called, but basically you can quickly remove it, not have to worry about leaks, and plug it into something else if you have a part that supports EVGA's hardware. So in theory, you can plug like a 360 mil rad into a CPU block, into a GPU block, back onto the radiator, or if you have more rads than that, you can just keep adding to the loop, and it sounds like a no hassles custom water cooling loop, but it's not hard tubing. This is clearly designed for hard tubing, but I wonder if you can make it look good with something like EVGA's rads in this kind of case. The tempered glass is 5mm thick, which is thicker than normal, so that's going to be nice in terms of the build quality and sturdiness, especially when you consider the fact that it seems like there's just these metal corners holding everything up outside of that, so it could flex quite a bit with the tempered glass off. Now, in terms of storage, you can have up to 6 2.5-inch, 3.5-inch drives with the hard drive cage. So they support 3.5-inch and 2.5-inch, and 2 2.5-inch drives exclusively, which I believe are these, with the hard drive tray. These are the 3.5-inch. Actually, no, that looks like a 3.5-inch drive in there. So I wonder where the 2.5-inch exclusives are in this case. I don't seem to see anything myself, but basically, you would have to get rid of these hard drive cases if you wanted to mount these rads, but obviously you can just Velcro SSDs, so if you're just using SSDs, that's not really much of a concern, because you can just put the SSDs wherever you want. Yeah, it's looking like you can put 2 560s and 1 280 and 1 240, not 2 280s at the same time, but you can choose one or the other, and this case has a lot of potential in terms of custom water cooling loops. I would not be surprised if someone like Jay's 2 Cents makes a video with a build in this case, but beyond that, it's very niche, and I believe it's very expensive. Let me look at this price. Actually, no, it's $250, so that's even a really good price for a case. I feel like this is actually very competitive with something like the Fantex case, in the sense that if you're looking to build a custom water cooling loop, this might actually be a better option. So the next thing I want to talk about is the Omen X Desktop. I find it interesting how comparable this is to the Deepcool Quadstellar in terms of how it's compartmentalized. Though instead of being like one compartment for each individual thing, there are two compartments that are together, which is fine. I mean, the airflow is going to be a little bit better in that sense. You can just buy the case, which I think is really nice. It's $600, so it kind of competes a bit with the Deepcool Quadstellar, but I feel like it's completely different in the sense that it has so many conveniences. I noticed if you push this thing, it comes off, and there's like a bunch of additional screws that in case you need them. These are hard drive bays. They're hot swappable, and then the connectivity has two USB 3.0 Type C, two USB 3.0 Type A, dual jack SD card reader, which is really nice for creative artists, and then you have, just creators in general. The SD card's really nice, and then this is the rear I/O on the default configuration if you buy this with a system and an HP Omen branded motherboard. But you can put any, I believe, mini ITX, no micro ATX, just on the fact that it's 2 GPUs. You can put any micro ATX power motherboard in here and not run into issues regarding rear I/O, because to me this seems a little bit lacking compared to what other I/Os offer. I don't see any display ports. I don't see any USB 2.0. I don't see two Ethernets stuff. I don't see a bunch of options in terms of audio and stuff like that. So I think the best option would be to buy this case and then build your computer in it. Beyond that, it probably has massive water cooling support. Like there's a 360mm in here. There has to be more else like on this side too, or maybe that's just packed full of hard drive mounts. I don't see the specs for this case. Yeah, I don't see. Well, there's hard drive bays there, and then the other compartments for the power supply behind this. Oh, cool! It has RGB LEDs, so there you go. And then it really lets you customize them. I think that really gives it a sense of character that can be very unique to the individual. So it has its options. The case does, and then they try to combine it with some peripherals, but it doesn't seem like these are RGB, so I probably wouldn't get any of these to match this case, but that's just me. The last thing I wanted to talk about was the Lenovo IdeaCentre AIO, which I feel like is the coolest AIO I've ever seen, because it has a 27-inch 2560 by 1440 144 hertz FreeSync panel. This is it FreeSync or is it G-Sync? Because it comes with an NVIDIA graphics card by default, I believe. Let me look at this. That's weird. They don't say what the hertz is, even though we know it's 144 hertz. I don't know if it comes with FreeSync or G-Sync on it. Like I don't remember. I remember hearing about it somewhere else. But basically, what's so cool about this is that it has a monitor-only switch. So when this thing is obsolete, this AIO, you can just use the monitor, or alternatively, you can run a dual streaming system or something along those lines, where this AIO is your gaming PC, and then you have a streaming PC plugged into it, and then you can turn off and on the monitor-only switch to change displays. I don't know if this is possible, but that sounds like something you should be able to do with a monitor-only switch, given that there's a full system in here. Comes with the bottom speaker bar. I wouldn't expect much out of it personally, but if it's good, that's just another added bonus. And then this back is completely removable. It has these HDMI ports, which I think are pretty VR friendly in the context that your desktop is not in a completely different place from your monitor. they really aren't showing as much of this computer as they could. Because the thing that's cool about this is that you can take this rear panel off, and there's a graphics card right in the square area right here, and you can like slide the bracket off and then change whatever graphics card you want. So for the most, and then there's like SODIMM slots here for laptop memory. So you can upgrade the RAM and the GPU, and that makes it last a lot longer. We've seen how processors have gotten, how slowly processors have been developing in the past several years. So I feel like in terms of the processors, in terms of the processing power, this monitor could easily last you like 5-6 years. But the graphics card, if given its upgradability, this system could last you an extremely long time, which makes this price tag much easier pill to swallow in that sense. Beyond that, it's a very show-offy AIO. I just wish everything on Earth had black colors on it for the sake of compatibility with other hardware. But beyond that, this is really nice. This is one of the most innovative AIOs I've ever seen. I guess that's it. Up to GTX 1080, latest and most powerful graphics option, or the AMD RX 460 card with FreeSync technology for fast loading times. That doesn't make sense. 1080 RX 460? I mean, for the sake of saving money, if the RX 460 is so much cheaper, you could just like take out the RX 460 and put in a Vega GPU as soon as those come out. If this thing has FreeSync technology, then yeah, that seems like the best. That seems like the best option, because the 1080 doesn't make sense to get with a FreeSync monitor. I would probably get the lowest end model with the RX 460 and then put a better GPU in it that's AMD oriented. So might be a good idea to actually wait until Vega comes out for this AIO, but beyond that, it's still a fairly capable computer given that FreeSync is free. If you really wanted it this bad, I guess I wouldn't blame you for getting an NVIDIA graphics card with something as unique as this. So I guess that's it. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.